Welcome to the Warrior Gamer Headquarters podcast. Lieutenant Colonel Ken Crigliano, your co-host. All right, this is Warrior Gamer Headquarters podcast and show episode 12. We are rocking and rolling. We are a dirty dozen now, so we're getting older. We're growing up. Now, our CEO and our founder and my co-hosts here all know that I don't like to really do time relevant podcasts, so like things that just happened today or last week or whatever. But this topic has been really timeless, and it has been a topic of incidents at schools around the country, and also how does that relate to being connected with society and with friends and everything. And so I am going to admit into the call here a first sergeant from the Colorado Air National Guard, who is a decorated dude on the topic of mental health and wellness, particularly with the military population and with university students, because he was at a university, ran Student Veterans of America chapter for that university. So him and April are going to own this space and just run all over me on it. So let me add him real quick. Let's see if we can get him. There he is. Let's see about his audio. So, Josh, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so we did a quick intro. We are live. Okay, we're broadcasting right now. We did a quick intro on what the subject matter is today, which is very relevant to you. And April brought up a very good topic on our pre-show, which was about school shootings, school incidents. And there was a Harvard study, which you'll be able to talk to a little bit better than I can, about the feeling of connectedness and how that relates to mental health. So, April, are you able to just refresh our memories on that study as much as you can remember and paraphrase for the folks who are tuned in?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Ken. It's always a joy. My week gets brighter when I get to see you. One of the things that I was dealing with today, Joshua, pleasure to meet you. My brother's son goes to MSU, and yesterday there was the 67th school shooting in the nation at MSU, leaving 3 dead, 5 in critical condition, and a whole bunch of parents in just traumatic state. My brother included. He spent an hour and a half not knowing where his son was, not being able to get connected to him. And that's when I talked to Ken about, the one of the things that this 80-year-old Harvard study showed, that what we value the most is connection to the people we love and connection to the people we care about. And when that's severed, there's just a trauma that is hard to explain and hard to deal with. And I was wondering if you had some tools or some advice on how people deal with that trauma in the moment where you don't know what's up and down. Like that hour and a half my brother spent sort of in panic mode, wondering if his kid was one of the 3 that was shot. His kid was literally barricaded in another dorm room with 4 other students.
April, Josh here. Thank you for that, sharing your story. And that story is very powerful. And few people will be able to truly understand that emotion that you shared. What I do with people, to answer your question about connectedness, is I ask them how many groups they are involved with. How many hats, as a metaphor, are they wearing? Because the more communities that people are in, participating as a member or a leader in an organization, whether that is a faith-based organization or a nonprofit, a work-based organization, employee resource groups, just We need our people, family groups, to be a part of them as far as feeling, and then also feel included in them and participating, so that when they have a moment of panic or unsureness and there's an unknown, they have a connection to people, real life people that they can call in the time of need. And they don't have to think about who to call. So the first tactical exercise that I have people do is I have them pull out their phone and look at their favorites list. And then I say, I want you to build a favorites list if you don't already have it built. And put the people that are in your trusted inner circle that you know you can count on, that they will answer when you need them. And then evaluate that list over time, because some people are in our life for a day, week, a month, or a season. Very few people will be in our life for a lifetime. And that longitudinal study that you mentioned just really recognizes what we've learned with the Blue Zone solution, if you've read that, or knowledge about those long-term connections with communities in Greece and Okinawa, Japan, also had an area where these individuals lived and were friends from childhood all the way until they passed. And that allowed them to keep the connection and a reason to live again. So I'm with you. I totally agree. And the connectedness starts with knowing that you have people that you can call when you need them. Over.
That's fantastic. One of the things my brother mentioned too, again, and I didn't ask him permission to talk about him, but I think it's helpful to, because I felt really bad because my head was down writing a grant. So I didn't even know there was a school shooting. So he didn't get the support from me that I would normally be giving. And it's sort of, with your own kids, you want the family to be there for them. And it's hard when you come back after the fact and say, oh, but I really would have been there.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, which is I have two different perspectives, which is I consider myself an intervenist. And so I, like, as weird as it sounds, I go, if I get on a plane or I go travel or I'm in a public space or whatever, and I say, if it's going to be, let it be me. And so let me be there if something's going to go down, because I have no problem, going after someone, taking someone down, or even being there for someone if someone breaks down. Mm-hmm. And I know Josh is the same way. Josh is my best friend in the whole world. And I know that he is actively tuned to see the little beginning evidence of either a bad situation, a good situation, and he's just there. And I know God has put him in places for particular reasons so that he can intervene. So that's one perspective, is like, I see this and I'm like, I think a lot of military men and women are going to relate that they're just like, man, if I was there, this would not have happened. Right. Yeah. And then on the flip side is my wife is a teacher. And every time these go down, man, all the teachers in America, they feel it. They're trained to be empathetic. They're born to teach and to educate our youth and to grow the next generation of society. And it's like they feel it inside of them. And, I have to be there for her. And then I have to have a response, to say, babe, all important callings have significant risk, and this is yours, and you just have to know that it's for a good reason. And so that's how I view it. And I'm definitely up for, April, I'm really interested on when these things happen on universities, and so many. One happened at one of my interns' school. I have two interns at Virginia Tech, and there's incidents there. And so I'm curious, when you're talking to your peers or even your students, does this topic come up, and how do you how do you address it?
Yeah, it really does, especially being in Chicago. You see our campus behind me. It's absolutely beautiful, but it's surrounded by there's there's risk everywhere, I always say, and you bring your world with you. But it's one of those things that you don't want to harp on. You don't want it front of mind for the kids, but you want them to be aware and you want them to know what to do. Like for the instance in the MSU event just yesterday, there's great heroism with all of the tragedy. There was the story of in the room where I think they said two of the children were killed. Another kid broke a window, jumped out the window, and stood at the bottom and let people jump into his arms.
Oh my gosh.
So, he had to stand in there not knowing if that active shooter was coming after them or not. And he could have ran away, but he stood there, catching student after student to get him out of the danger zone. So just like with our military folks making those decisions that put themselves in danger in order to save others, unfortunately, our domestic college kids are facing the same thing. Our inner city kids in Chicago are facing the same thing. They have to come up against a decision of, do I go after this guy with a gun or do I wait for somebody to come and kill my whole family? Which is sad that the decision has come down to options like that. But I think that's where people like Joshua and others who study resilience and study, mental states that you need to cope with death and tragedy and fear, just expressing more and more coping mechanisms for before these things happen. What do you do? How will you respond? What's our action plan? Like having that kind of stuff out in the open, I think that can really help. But I would do just what you said, Ken. I would throw it to Joshua and ask him what he thinks. What are the best prepared schools doing to sort of mitigate this risk?
For me, I would, because my expertise is not in school safety, I have a member who's in my unit right now who's just recognized with a award around statewide award for school resource officers. And he would be the best person to connect you with. So Ken, I'll ask that you share the information when I get it to you.
Sure.
Fantastic. Thank you.
The man's awesome. Michael Newton. And he equips people with these things. Short-term thinking, when you mentioned what do people do to cope, a safety plan is the first thing that comes to mind because we equip our members with resiliency skills, and then we need to also engage with safety plans for them. And so if it was already thought out ahead of time, that's why this active school shooter drills are done, and they're done with as much realism as possible so that our members, the people, our children, our students are not using system 2 critical thinking in that moment. They're just acting, and they've already gotten the training because we always resort to the level of training that we have. So when we do drills, if you do use the time to prep students prior to them, that's where you can bring in the realism. Like you said, you don't want it to be a constant worry, but when we do the drills, make them as real as possible.
Yeah, I am the safety response, crisis response guy for my floor. And, I'm in a very sensitive thing, and we are 100% a target, and people have tried to gain access to not only the place that I work, but the multiple other places I have. And, I'm just kind of like got stuck with it because of like, I just told them like, I don't, if someone comes in here, like they're going to go down. Like, if I have to ninja climb off the ceiling and like jump off and strangle someone, like that's going to go down. And you're 100% right, Josh. And if there is one big golden nugget you take from this, it is you don't just planning for it doesn't mean that you're expecting it, and doesn't mean that you're wanting it, and doesn't mean that you're willing it, but it's making a muscle memory. So when something goes down, you're not governed by monkey mind and you're confused. You have a plan, you execute it. And that's the biggest thing that we talk about at crisis response is like, okay, this is going to go down like one of four ways. Okay, you need to identify which way it is, and then you need to execute the exit strategy. And then if you can't exit, you barricade. This person comes, you could be super quiet. If they gain entry to where you're at, you got to fight. And this is how you fight. And it's just like decision tree so that they're not like just blown out with stress. And so I'm asking you to, as in the education sector, when it relates to gaming, and I know Josh is not an expert in the gaming space, but I am interested in maybe his thoughts or opinions on the effect that gaming has on folks who will subsequently experience these crises. What do you think are some of the effects, positive and maybe negative, of our gaming community in these types of crises? Not just like if they're there, but even like hearing about it. Do you think that they handle it better? And I think I'll go with April first, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, I think, just like comic books back when Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and those guys were writing, there were people who were saying these comic books are the worst thing that has ever happened to our kids. They're making the bad boys hang on the corner. They're doing this and that. So I think, fast forward, 75 years, and people are saying the same thing about gaming, that, these guys are playing CSGO and that makes them more prone to shoot. And there has been no validated study that supports that. That came out as almost like propaganda years and years ago. And it's been refuted over and over and over. Video games don't cause violence. And actually, I would argue that video games are a fantastic outlet for people who are having violent tendencies or who are having thoughts that are not conducive to, societal norms. I think video games are a fantastic place to sort of barricade yourself and do something really focused and just sort of give your mind a break in a fantasy world. And they do know they're in a fantasy world. I don't think that argument that they are blending reality with non-reality makes sense. So I would argue the opposite of many folks on this front. I would say gaming can be part of the solution for helping relieve stress, helping relieve aloneness. This shooter from MSU identified himself as a complete loner. And gaming is a fantastic way to make friends, to build a community, to find your people. And I think that gaming is in many cases today, it's evolved far from the, this flack it got in the 80s. And it's an amazing, amazing outlet for artistic expression, for skill development, for confidence building, for communication. There's so many advantages to having your what you do in your free time be just like if it was a physical sport. Many of those same things that you develop in that physical sport, my students are developing through their esports. And then I'll toss it to Josh. Just I'd be curious to see how you what your take on that is in terms of the gun violence in America. Is it augmented by video games, or do you think video games play no part in it, or do you think video games are a contributing factor?
Most of the violence that I've read about does not have direct correlation, and it would be very hard to prove direct correlation with video games. What we saw was in some of our military members that were highly habitual into gaming was some decreased in-person connectedness. You talked about connection earlier, and the loner strikes a chord with me because I was on a committee that was spending a lot of hours talking with our airmen, but also working on bringing them in person. And we know that people have to, so we had people in dorms and they were constantly spending isolated time with COVID in 2020 and then not making friends in person. So there were a lot of eating opportunities that we brought people together, got them out of the dorms so they can meet in-person friends and know that they have shared interests in the same games. And that broke down the barriers of the isolation. Regarding the activities that anyone does, I always ask about the habits that they're forming and the amount of length of time they spend on anything. Because even sleeping, it's essential to us, but sleeping can be overdone with too many hours, and that's not healthy either. So as long as these are, students and military members and their supervisors and mentors are talking about the time that they spend and the habits that they form around anything, whether it's athletics or esports, then it can still be a healthy relationship with them.
That's a huge insight. And that's another big golden nugget this Goose is dropping on our show. So if you take away the number 2 thing, which is, there's a lot of folks, especially some of the older folks and maybe even the executive folks, because we deal with a lot of companies who are interested in the gaming space. But one of the big things that they talk about is this is an addictive thing. People are playing all hours of the day. They're getting out of shape. It's poisoning their mind, all this stuff. It's a very big thing. And it's what you just dropped there is hey, everything in excess is excessive. And if you can take this particular, let's say hobby, right? Or love or passion, and you extrapolate it to anything else. It could be sports. I mean, me and Josh are addictive physical athletes, right? We're both trying to make the Air Force triathlon team this year and, all this stuff. And we're just training like maniacs. Matter of fact, he is driving 50 minutes to the gym right now. And this is the only reason I was able to squeeze him on this call. So can you imagine how crazy he sounds to people who don't work out at all? And so anything in excess is excessive. And this is just another thing. And it has just different effects than some of the other things. So watching TV is excessive. It has its drawbacks. Playing sports can be excessive. Gaming can be excessive. So if you have a healthy relationship with this, like Josh said, wow, it has a lot of benefit to it. And he has directly seen it with his military members as well. And now April has, and I have too. So I think that's super cool. And today's going to be a shorter episode. So I think we'll go maybe. Go ahead.
I wanted to just share some really big success stories that I listened to a father in the military tell me how he was able, on these temporary duty assignments, we call them TDYs, and he's in this faraway place, separated from his family, but after work, he's able to go home and play video games with his son.
Oh.
And connect with him. And I just loved hearing that. So I know that it has a good place in our lives.
Absolutely. And you mentioned habits, Joshua. There's a book, again, I always like to drop a book for folks. It's called Atomic Habits by James Clear. And it's a fantastic book if anybody is looking to try to be like Ken and Joshua like I am. I said, I think that, the gaming is a fantastic outlet, but it's also a great way for people who are not connected to stay connected. And particularly in the military, it's a great way to introduce training that you wouldn't normally that people may be bored sitting through. If you gamify it and do some game-based learning, you have some fantastic opportunities to really, really drill stuff in a way that people remember and enjoy.
100% to everything you said. Agreed.
Awesome. Well, I know, Josh, that if I time this right, you are just arriving at the gym, and we will let you go. And we are greatly, greatly appreciative of your time. We're going to reach a lot of folks. Please share this on your channels as well, Josh, if you don't mind. And pending anything else from you guys, I think that's a great episode, short and sweet, addresses something very relevant. And we have two literal world-class experts. Now, also, Josh, I did a terrible job introducing you before you tuned in. Can you just tell some folks just a little bit about you so that they know that you are legit?
Yes, thank you for the invitation. I really appreciated meeting you too, April. Special person. I'm glad that Ken has so many great people around him. I have spent 13 years in the Air Force and worked many different geographic regions and worked in so many different cultures, which taught me the value of diversity and what everybody brings to the table if they're invited, and then they're made to feel included. And so I do that, and I pay attention, like Ken said, to people's verbals and nonverbals to see if they're healthy. And so I love people. My passion's been about people, and then I've matched my passion for inspiring people to be an inspirational airman for those who need someone. Ken and I have been in athletics. I've been there since he inspired me 12 years ago, and now I've been over 135 endurance sport athletes, and I help coach other athletes. Worked really well with forming a nonprofit organization, the Air Force Cycling Team, and we encourage also any other people that want to support us to find a good outlet for their stress with cycling and changing lives through that. So I encourage anyone who's listening, if they're interested, we gamify cycling by using Zwift and other technologies. So it's made cycling a lot more fun too. Thanks so much for the time. I got to jump off.
Thank you so much.
See you, buddy.
Pleasure to meet you. That's fantastic, Ken. I second Josh's. Your circle is amazing.
Yeah, what's funny is I know we didn't record it, but as we close this episode, me and April were just talking about how this morning I was riding my bike in the virtual world and broke my personal record that me and Josh had set a few days ago. And so we were drafting off each other in the virtual world to try to break this record. And I was able to do it alone today. So it's kind of really cool how just kind of, we just made a circle back, and life is just really cool that way.
It truly is. I love that. That story is so inspirational, and I mean it. Like, you guys don't know the impact that you have just walking around in the form that you're in. It's inspiring to normal folks who are like, "Oh God, I need to drop that last 40."
I hope so.
It really is. It's fantastic. And those games are also those games that drafting, that's real engineering software to really do the math to get the draft right. So there's a lot of computer science and math and all. You're supporting a ton of people by playing and buying those games. So there's so much to everything. It's a beautiful world.
One of the best things I do in my life is I buy people memberships to this stuff, because I was doing the math and I'm like, okay, I could buy Josh like this book that's like $35 or whatever, right? And then he'll read it and put it up, whatever. But I bought him the Zwift membership, and I just renew it like every year, and it brings him so much happiness, especially once every 2 months or whatever, we can get on at the same time because our time differences, and he works all night. It's crazy. And so we get on there. It's like, so I buy people memberships to like Curiosity Stream.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I give that for Christmas and everything. I give Zwift. And it's just cool,
And
like a whole year.
mastermind, I gave my uncle a mastermind membership, and he loved
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So if there's anyone out there who doesn't know what to get and they just love, and they have to do it, and you want to give the gift that keeps giving, give someone a membership, Audible or whatever. Give them a membership to something, and they'll think of you every day. So, all right.
Fantastic. You are the best.
You too, April. You're awesome. You amaze me every time we're on here, and I hope that we're hitting more people and getting our exposure out. We will start a massive marketing campaign in the next couple of weeks to get increase our ground game and get some more of eyes on us. So look for that, everyone. All right, and that's it. Thank you so much, and good night.
Good night. Thank you.